everyone, it's Sharronda from Pay or Waits, and today I'm going to be reviewing Leaving Neverland, which is one of the documentaries that premiered today in Sundance to a lot of controversy. For those of you who don't know, this movie is directed by Dan Reed, who's responsible for documentaries such as The Pedophile Hunters, 3 Days of Terror, and many more. But more importantly, this documentary was met with a lot of controversy, not only from the family of Michael Jackson, but also a lot of Michael Jackson's fans who tried to get this film from being released at Sundance. For those of you who read reports, there were tons of security. There were protesters, there were silent protesters who were handing out pamphlets saying, protect Michael, he's not here to defend himself. And so there's been a huge amount of controversy centering around Michael Jackson, who died in 2009. He's a famous pop star, for those of you who may not know. And so essentially this documentary, which is 4 hours long, it centers around two stories from two young men by the name of Wade Robinson and Jimmy Safechuck. And so essentially, these two young men were sexually abused by Michael Jackson from ages 7 to 10, going to age 14. And so this documentary kind of centers around these two young men and kind of goes into the story of how the sexual abuse began, how just the initial meeting between them and Michael Jackson happened, and kind of how they're dealing with all of this of what's going on that happened in their childhood to them now being young men who are in their 30s who have families of their own. And so, you know, there's been a huge deal with these documentaries, especially from just seeing Surviving R. Kelly. We have another documentary that's coming in Sundance that I'm actually going to see tomorrow called Untouchable, which centers around the sexual abuse allegations centering Harvey Weinstein. And so we're kind of in this era right now where we have these documentaries where we're kind of seeing the truth from the victim stories, people who are able to survive this abuse. And so I have to say that this was very tough. Like, this was really heavy. I was really only going to stay for the first 2 hours just to kind of get a gist of what this documentary was going to be like. But after hearing these stories and hearing how the sexual abuse began and seeing this timeline and this pattern that happened not only between these two young men, but also with other young men who had accused Michael Jackson, I had to stay. I felt like I had to finish listening to their stories to get more information. And I will have to say, from my personal experience, I really just don't see how someone can watch this documentary and not find validity or see the truth on what these young men are saying. And to see how something as small as a friendship or meeting one of your idols, like your greatest idol in the whole wide world, and establishing this friendship that kind of leads to more of the manipulation between Michael Jackson and the accusers. It was really wow, this was deep. This wasn't just a one and done type of thing. From the interactions between him and their families, how their families were kind of mesmerized or kind of just Michael Jackson is our family friend. He hangs out with us all the time. I was just wow, this wasn't just they're coming to his house. This was, going to their house, spending the night with them. And even when you kind of hear how these young men were sleeping in the same bed as Michael Jackson, I was just oh my God, I cannot believe that these things happen, that parents were okay with how some of these things happen. And one of the things that I actually do admire and I liked about this documentary is you kind of always have these questions. And especially when it comes to people who are underage that deal with the sexual abuse, first question that everyone always asks, where were the parents? What were the parents doing? And what I appreciate for Dan Reed doing this is he really takes time to go into what the family dynamics were between Jimmy and Wade's families. The aspirations for the young boys, how the parents played a role in this friendship with Michael Jackson as well, going into the parents' motivations behind it. So for this film, they interview the mothers of both of the young men. And so they talk about what was going on in their minds, why they didn't feel like there were any red flags that needed to be raised, why they weren't alarmed about Michael Jackson spending so much time in one-on-one, a long time with their children. And so I really appreciated that by the time the documentary is over, there was only one like big question that I still had, and I really wanted to see how those who did come forward and those who did speak their truth as to what happened, how they felt about this documentary. Have they talked to Wade or Jimmy? Because those of you who don't know, they go into how these two young men, they testified on behalf of Michael Jackson that he never touched them, he never did anything, they never had any type of inappropriate relationship. And so that's why this movie was so much more shocking to watch, to even understand the psychological impacts that their relationship with Michael Jackson, how they viewed that relationship, did they feel that there was anything going on wrong, and how, you know, essentially they felt that they were in like a loving relationship with this man. Like they loved this man and they would do anything to help him, and how they felt like they were in this like kind of grown relationship. I was just like, oh my gosh, like how can someone just take advantage of young children, and kind of how the public stands by him. You know, even now, if you go look and see, all these people are saying this documentary is trash, it's all lies. And I just really don't understand how anyone can watch this and truly like believe that he did not have inappropriate relationships, not only with these two young men, that even the other allegations that, you know, came forward in the two trials that Michael Jackson had. I just don't understand how anyone can think that this man was not he was a pedophile. He sexually abused these children. And so for me, I would definitely say that this is a must watch. I believe that this will be airing on HBO later in April, but that's pretty much a gist of like how I felt about it. The two young men, Jimmy and Wade, they were actually there in the audience. None of us really knew that they were in the audience with us until Dan Reed actually brought them on stage. And I have to say that, first of all, after the first half of seeing it, because we had an intermission because this was 4 hours long, everyone was kind of just quiet, just like, I just need a minute, okay? I need a minute to myself. And by the time that this documentary ends, you're just like, I couldn't even watch nothing else the rest of the day. Like literally, I had to give myself a couple of hours before I can even come and kind of talk about this. And to see their faces, you can tell that they had been crying throughout the watching the documentary. To see them talk about it and why they decided to say these things. They also said that they were not paid for this documentary, for those who were saying that this was supposed to be some type of cash grab. I just really felt for them, and they got a standing ovation. There were people who were cheering them on, telling them how they feel like this documentary is really going to help a lot of people in these same type of circumstances. And they talk about the isolation because you feel like you're the only one and you really don't have anyone to talk to. And so I just really appreciate Dan Reed for, you know, bringing this story to everyone, for Jimmy and Wade sharing their truth, sharing their stories, and also sharing their families, how their family responded, you know, how this affects them as two married men, you know, with children, how this affects their relationships, you know, their friendships. I really thought that they did a very great job of kind of covering all of the bases of questions that the average viewer would have while watching this documentary. So those are pretty much my thoughts on Leaving Neverland. I don't want to give too much away. I'm not going to go into any details. I will wait until that actually comes out in April on HBO to go more in depth. But I just wanted to give you a brief overview, and if it's worth watching, is there credibility to what I saw, and did I believe it? So hopefully you guys can make your own judgments once you actually watch it. If there's any questions that you guys have, please feel free to ask me in the comment section below. So those are my thoughts on Leaving Neverland, one of the documentaries to premiere in the Sundance Film Festival. As always, my name is Sharronda from Payroll Waits, and if you like what you saw today, make sure you hit the like button, hit subscribe, share this video with your friends, and make sure you hit that notification bell, and I will see you soon.